Welcome everyone to the 26th Celebrity Synastry chart reading where I will be looking into Kourtney Kardashian and Scott Disick. If you don't know me, hi, I'm Adeline. I look at the dynamic between two celebrities using astrology, specifically Synastry. For those new and returning, I take notes on a Synastry chart looking at the personal planet signs, aspects, and if birth time available house overlays. I share these notes and add my extra insights and interpretations along the way. And of course, as always, leave your thoughts in the comments below and let's get a discussion going. So if that sounds good to you, like, subscribe, and keep on watching. Starting off with the sun, we have Kourtney's sun in Aries and Scott's sun in Gemini. They both have low tolerance for boredom. They both enjoy their independence in this relationship. Kourtney gets impatient with Scott's talkativeness. Kourtney should listen to Scott for his perspective, and Scott needs to learn not to depend on Kourtney for constant conversation. Scott's sun in Kourtney's third house. There's a comfortable atmosphere. Scott thinks Kourtney is brilliant. They enjoy talking about their days. Scott thinks Kourtney is predictable. Kourtney feels smarter around Scott. That is really sad. Scott sees Kourtney as someone with good common sense. Kourtney's sun opposite Scott's Saturn. Scott has the habit of parenting Kourtney. This is interesting because we saw before that Kourtney should listen to him for his perspective on things. You would think it's the other way around, so I'm not sure if we're going to see a bit more about this relationship of duty and obligation. Kourtney's identity may become suppressed. Kourtney is initially attracted to Scott's maturity. I wonder if this is a matter of because throughout their relationship, Scott has kind of proven to be a bit more on the immature side rather than the mature side. I wonder if initially in the relationship he was quite mature. Kourtney feels blocked and discouraged by Scott. Scott has the tendency to criticize and nag Kourtney. Kourtney's sun trines Scott's Neptune, tolerant and forgiving. Kourtney strengthens Scott's ego, they're attuned to each other's feelings, and Scott inspires Kourtney to be creative. Kourtney's sun opposite Scott's Pluto, relationship of growth, there's strong sexual attraction. It feels faded and it's a bond that is not easily broken. That's probably why they were on and off for so many years, because it just can't be done, or has been now. Both are separated by distance. Kourtney has the tendency to embarrass Scott. I also want to skew this a bit to make it her family has the tendency to embarrass Scott, because that kind of, embarrassing him, I think a lot of it did come from himself. But at the same time, I feel like that because of her family and like televising everything and putting everything out in the public, I think that made it worse. Kourtney uses Scott to boost herself in a negative way. This is weird. Scott's sun, Sextile Kourtney's Mercury. They share similar interests. There's an intellectual friendship. Able to work together. They like to talk to each other, particularly on Scott's end. He seems to really enjoy Kourtney's company. Resolve problems easily. They find it easy to share ideas and they're relaxed around each other. Scott wants to improve Kourtney. I wonder if this is potentially related to in the beginning of their relationship, or I guess when they were starting to be a family, like he kind of wanted to take Kourtney out of the California Kardashian lifestyle, and Scott values Kourtney's intelligence. Scott's sun, Sextile Kourtney's Mars. They motivate each other, exciting sexual life. They give each other space, they have different hobbies. Scott admires Kourtney's drive, they can further the other's goals. Neither feels blocked. I assume Scott wouldn't feel blocked because we did see Kourtney feels a bit blocked and discouraged by him, but hopefully we'll see a bit more. Both give the other confidence, they participate in activities together. Straightforward with each other, and they tend to get annoyed with each other. Scott's sun squared Kourtney's Saturn. Kourtney sacrifices her freedom. Scott is too sensitive to criticism. They both feel mature. I really hope so. They both attempt to support each other. Scott may outgrow Kourtney. Kourtney tends to be critical of Scott, which isn't great if he's sensitive to criticism. Scott will see Kourtney as traditions he wants to overcome. Interesting. Scott feels blocked and discouraged by Kourtney. So both of these two feel blocked and discouraged by the other. That's great. Both need to really want this relationship to work. I really see that. And I believe potentially in the earlier seasons of Keeping Up with the Kardashians that their therapy was a big part of their relationship. So now it's time for moon. So we have Kourtney's moon in Capricorn and Scott's moon in Sagittarius. Both enjoy their independence here. We see again potential to be great friends. Kourtney is a pessimist and Scott is an optimist. They both want different types of relationship. Both can help each other with the other's weaknesses. Scott's moon overlaid in Kourtney's 9th house. Scott idolizes Kourtney. Scott feels Kourtney is out of his league. Scott brings out the best in Kourtney. There's mutual respect, admiration, and affection. Kourtney may become emotionally attached to Scott, potentially why there is difficulty breaking this off. Kourtney may be dependent on Scott. There is possibility for long distance, and they share similar attitudes on politics and religions. Kourtney's moon trines Scott's Mercury, comfortable talking to each other about everything. It's a harmonious relationship. Scott enjoys being emotionally nourished by Kourtney. I don't know if we've seen anything yet so far related to that. Scott provides a foundation for Kourtney's feelings, and Kourtney is comfortable expressing her feelings of Scott. I think that's what we keep seeing. We keep seeing there is a pretty comfortable factor with them being very relaxed. They're comfortable and open with each other, so that's nice. Scott's moon trine Kourtney's Mercury, so this is a repeated aspect, just inverted. So Kourtney enjoys being emotionally nourished by Scott. Kourtney provides a foundation for Scott's feelings, and Scott is comfortable expressing his feelings of Kourtney. Scott's moon trine Kourtney's Mars. They're instinctively drawn to each other. There is mutual attraction. It's a lively relationship. Yeah, definitely. Scott nurtures and feeds Kourtney's ego. I feel like we've seen this before, that he really feeds her ego, which is odd. Arguing is not uncommon. Kourtney teaches Scott to be brave and confident. Both learn about their instincts and needs here, and expressing feelings is spontaneous here, which I don't really like in combination with arguing. Is not uncommon. Scott's moon trine Kourtney's Jupiter. Good fortune, possibility of being too excessive, happy in each other's presence. Adventure is important in this relationship. Honest communication is easy, and Kourtney helps Scott with his emotions. So this would be linked to he enjoys being emotionally nourished. But this could also be potentially linked to Scott with his other issues throughout the years. Kourtney may have helped him throughout that. Scott's moon square Kourtney's Saturn. Scott feels emotionally insecure. I think this could potentially go back to he feels out of Kourtney's league. Possibility of an awkward relationship. I don't think we've seen anything so far that has been really awkward. Scott feels judged by Kourtney, going back to the criticism she's giving him. Kourtney sees Scott as needy and oversensitive. So I assume potentially when she does help Scott with his emotions or emotionally, probably maybe he doesn't feel very secure in receiving that support for whatever way. Maybe we'll see a bit more. So now it's time for Mercury. We have Kourtney's Mercury in Aries and Scott's Mercury in Taurus. Scott encourages Kourtney to focus on physical aspects of life. Kourtney resents Scott for his criticism. Interesting. So they're both critical of each other. They both block each other. They both discourage each other. Scott sees Kourtney as impractical. Kourtney sees Scott as someone with no vision. I believe we were seeing how Scott very much inspires Kourtney to be creative, so I assume Kourtney wants him to be a bit more, step up. They help each other with their strengths. Scott's Mercury in Kourtney's 2nd house. Scott can easily express himself to Kourtney. We see again Kourtney feels more talkative around Scott. We did see this on Scott's end before, so I'm glad they enjoy talking to each other. Their communication seems pretty decent. We did see there was a bit of an argumentative element, but Kourtney finds it easy to understand Scott. Kourtney's Mercury trines Scott's Jupiter. Scott is enthusiastic about Kourtney's thoughts and ideas. This is an interesting element that keeps coming up. Scott seems to very much inspire Kourtney creatively. Positive and inspiring conversations, strong friendship. We keep seeing this. And it's kind of sad because I don't feel like these two would have been the worst friends. Scott introduces Kourtney to new ways of thinking. Scott can be too lenient with Kourtney. Kourtney helps Scott with self-expression. Business together is advantageous. They enjoy traveling together. That also seems to come up, which I don't know if they ever did. They come from different cultures. As I was saying, there's the whole West Coast versus East Coast as well. Optimistic meeting. Kourtney's Mercury squares Scott's Neptune. They think creatively around each other, particularly Kourtney. They both need to be clearer with communication. I feel like from what we've seen so far, it is pretty clear and honest so far, so maybe we'll see a bit more. Kourtney misunderstands Scott. Scott sees Kourtney as practical and logical and feels misunderstood. Kourtney sees Scott as abstract. Kourtney's trust for Scott fades. This is interesting. This is very interesting because we saw there is a bit of like on and off dynamic to this relationship, and the deteriorating factor seems to be on Kourtney's end. Her trust for Scott fades. Scott feels limited by Kourtney, going back to how both of them criticize and block each other. Scott's Mercury opposite Kourtney's Uranus. Kourtney finds Scott's opinions as superficial or traditional. I'm leaning towards the superficial bit purely just because we saw Scott finds Kourtney a bit too traditional. They're impatient with each other. Scott finds it hard to depend on Kourtney. Stressful communication, interruptive conversations. Yeah, so I feel like they are pretty clear and blunt and honest with each other and very much open with each other, which potentially could link to them being the communication being a bit stressful and interruptive because they just, spit it out. Kourtney stimulates Scott mentally and they make impulsive decisions together. So now it's time for Venus. We have Kourtney's Venus in Pisces and Scott's Venus in Cancer. It's a devoted relationship. I guess it was while it lasted. There's mutual respect. They prioritize their emotions. We didn't really see a particular great amount of data when it comes to their emotions, except that they both enjoy being emotionally nourished by the other, but Scott doesn't generally. He feels a bit insecure, I think it was. There are fundamental differences. I see that. We saw that with the whole cultural difference, and also like Kourtney seems to be a bit more the traditional one, and then Scott seems to be a bit more superficial and flashy. Scott gets concerned about Kourtney and it's warm and nurturing. Scott's Venus in Kourtney's 5th house. Scott sees Kourtney as perfect. I think we see again with him idolizing her and really viewing her on a pedestal. Scott is forgiving of Kourtney's faults. Kourtney appreciates the admiration from Scott. Kourtney may take advantage of Scott. That's a weird element as well. She tends to embarrass him and now take advantage of him. This is weird. They are both satisfied here. Their Venus signs are trine together. I should have mentioned earlier the Venus Cancer, Venus Pisces are both water signs. But with this one, they enjoy each other's company. They share a mutual community. I assume this would be related to the Kardashians, honestly. Appreciate how the other dresses, handles money, and socializes. Both have a desire to make each other happy. Kourtney's Venus squared Scott's Neptune. Kourtney needs to make sure she falls in love with the real Scott and not her illusion. I think this could be potentially going back to, we saw in the beginning how I think Kourtney initially finds Scott mature. There was something to do with that, but we have seen a bit more of Scott being immature. So I wonder when she initially met him, he was very mature and everything. But over time, that slowly deteriorated and she's kind of clinging onto that original mature Scott. Extremes of trusting. Scott needs to be careful to keep promises and not make huge ones. Scott has a hard time dealing with Kourtney because she doesn't want to see reality. I wonder, just because reality TV made me think reality TV, I wonder if he has a hard time dealing with her and potentially her family as well, because they are so all the time on like TV and like out in the public. They're on the public image all the time, not necessarily their downtime image. Maybe that's why he has a difficult time with dealing with Kourtney and her family. Scott's Venus trying Kourtney's Uranus. Relationship seems odd to outsiders. Enjoy experimenting together. They share unusual interests. It's an unconventional setup. I don't believe we've seen anything with their meeting so far. Not sure how they met, but potentially unconventional. Scott is drawn to Kourtney's unique qualities. There is an element of fate. Kourtney finds Scott charming and attractive. It's not long term. We've seen quite a few deteriorating aspects. I don't believe we've seen anything specifically yet, like long term or not, except now, but throughout the reading it seems to be quite deteriorating. Scott's Venus square Kourtney's Pluto. Fine line between love and hate. There's intense sexual attraction. Bring out each other's deepest insecurities. That's not great. I think especially with both of them tending to criticize each other. On Kourtney's end, I'm not sure why she would feel insecure as such, besides the trust element. Sorry. The trust element with her. But with Scott, it is like he, idolizes Kourtney and he feels a bit insecure around her in terms of that. Intense fear of losing each other. Going back to this bond is not easily broken. Power struggles happen, they cannot be just friends after, and Kourtney has the higher power. So now it's time for Mars. We have Kourtney's Mars in Aries and Scott's Mars in Gemini. They are both impulsive and live in the moment. Kourtney is easily irritated with Scott. We keep seeing they're both annoyed with each other. Scott's Mars overlaid in Kourtney's third house. Scott is more blunt around Kourtney. Kourtney may intimidate Scott. I see that. Kourtney is sensitive to Scott's intensity. So I assume with what we've seen in the relationship, with Scott's particular public issues, I assume Kourtney had a really difficult time with that, especially she seemed to try to help him. And yeah, I don't feel like she had much success in that and kind of gave up. Their Mars signs are sextile to each other, so there's healthy competitiveness. They do sports together. I don't believe they did, but potentially. Fighting can happen quickly. This is another element to this relationship. I feel like it's too open to a fault. We have been seeing they're, very honest and open with each other, but it seems to be to a fault where, like, they will say anything. Sometimes you do need to sort of think before you speak instead of spinning out everything, because this is where fighting can happen easily. They're supportive of each other and they're in sync. Kourtney's Mars trines Scott's Jupiter. They feel they can do anything together. Scott is okay with Kourtney asserting herself. He seems to really put her on the pedestal, like he's very happy with her having the higher power, asserting herself. Healthy competitiveness, they have fun together, enjoy trying new things together, shared interest in sports and travel. Scott helps Kourtney get out of her comfort zone. Kourtney feels more energized around Scott. They're a lucky couple and possibly a reckless relationship. Kourtney's Mars trines Scott's Uranus. Kourtney feels free around Scott. Unusual meeting, maybe an open relationship. Interesting. Respect each other's independence, going back to the beginning, and we saw a couple times they both feel very much independent here. Kourtney is not a fan of Scott's lack of boundaries. I assume this would be where, like, the lack of trust comes from, and I assume throughout the years Scott was having, affairs with other women. Scott's Mars square Kourtney's Saturn. Scott tries to impress Kourtney. Kourtney's standards are in conflict with Scott's efforts. That's bad. And kind of linking back to the criticism thing, Kourtney may try to control Scott as she thinks Scott is immature. This relationship, I feel like, would have been a lot better because we did see the friend element. I feel like them getting involved together led to this. Like, I feel like Kourtney had such a good view on Scott. Like, he's so mature and charming. And then the relationship happens, and now this. So that was the final aspect. I hope you guys enjoyed this reading. If you did, give this video a like, subscribe to my channel, and click the notification bell for more videos from me. And yeah, that's all I have to say. I will see you guys next time. Bye!